On a stormy night in Chicago, billionaire Jonathan Reed never expected to find a homeless girl protecting two abandoned babies in an alley. What began as a chance encounter turned into a life-changing discovery, revealing a lost family, a buried past, and a battle that would redefine what family truly means. Before we get started, leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from so we can say hello to you. Now, on to the story. The rain fell like punishment from the sky, soaking Chicago's glossy pavement in sheets of cold silver as thunder rolled low and angry overhead. Jonathan Reed, 47 years old and one of the city's most powerful restaurateurs, stepped out of his flagship restaurant, Reed & Company, without an umbrella. He barely flinched as the storm swallowed him whole. "Sir, your car's waiting," his assistant shouted from under a canopy, holding open the back door of a sleek black town car. But Jonathan waved him off without a word. Sometimes, a man needed to feel something real, even if it came from the sky trying to drown him. He tugged the collar of his designer coat higher, the rich Italian fabric already clinging to his body. Every inch of him radiated power, from his salt and pepper hair swept back with practiced ease to the fine leather shoes splashing through sidewalk puddles. On any other night, he would have been seated in the VIP lounge with investors or critics, sipping aged scotch and discussing expansion plans. But not tonight. Tonight, his chest felt hollow. What's the point of success if there's no one to come home to? That thought echoed in his mind louder than the rain. For a man who'd built an empire out of elegance and culinary brilliance, Jonathan's life had become a museum, flawless, curated, and completely lifeless. The rain had grown relentless, its icy needles piercing through Jonathan Reed's expensive wool coat as he turned down the narrow service alley behind his flagship restaurant, Reed's. The city lights faded here, replaced by dumpsters and the dim flicker of a failing security lamp. He shouldn't have been out here. His penthouse was just a few blocks away and his driver was likely circling, but something tugged at him. Something unshakable. Then he saw her. At first, it was just a shape, a crumpled silhouette in the shadows, almost blending into the brick wall. He slowed, heart thudding against his ribs, his mind bracing for the worst. Chicago had its share of street ghosts, people who slipped through the cracks of a society too busy climbing ladders to notice who fell. But this was different. A child. Jonathan stopped mid-step, water pooling at his polished shoes as his eyes adjusted. She was maybe 8 or 9. Her dark hair was a tangled mess of rain and grit. Her clothes, if they could still be called that, hung from her frame in sagging, soaked layers. But what chilled him wasn't her condition. It was what she clutched to her chest. 2 tiny bundles. He stepped closer, slowly, cautiously. The girl's chin snapped up, and Jonathan was stunned by the sheer defiance in her eyes. Emerald green, sharp and defensive, like an alley cat protecting her last scrap of food. "You can't stay here," Jonathan said gently, barely above the sound of the storm. "It's not safe." "I know," she replied, her voice brittle but composed. "But I don't have anywhere else." The girl didn't flinch. Instead, she clutched the infants closer, her small arms wrapped protectively around them like a shield. "Please," she said, her voice surprisingly firm for someone so small. "Don't call the police. They'll take them away." Jonathan's throat tightened. "What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered, gaze locked with his. "I found them 2 days ago. Someone threw them out. I wasn't going to let them die." Thunder cracked above them, but the sound barely registered. Jonathan crouched slowly in the rain, ignoring the cold seeping through his expensive slacks. These weren't just babies. This wasn't just a lost kid. This was something else, something profound. "They were in the dumpster," Lily added, her voice cracking for the first time. "I wrapped them in tablecloths from behind the cafe. They were so cold, but I kept them warm. I fed them water from a bottle I found." He stared at her, stunned by the surreal horror of it all. "Where are your parents?" he asked softly. Lily hesitated. Then, with steady eyes and a lift of her chin, she answered, I don't have any. It's just us now. Me, Grace, and Noah. The names hit him like a punch to the gut. Somehow, giving them names made it more real, more painful. Jonathan blinked through the rain and emotion. A little girl, barely more than a baby herself, surviving in a dark alley while protecting two infants from a world that had discarded them like trash. Something inside Jonathan shattered. And without realizing it, his life had just changed forever. The rain hadn't let up, not for a moment, by the time Jonathan Reed bent down in that dark alley behind his restaurant. His Italian suit clung to him like second skin, drenched and forgotten, because all that mattered now was the trembling girl and the fragile bundles in her arms. She couldn't have been more than 9, and yet the way she shielded the babies told a different story. This wasn't a child who'd given up. This was a warrior, one who had nothing but still fought like her life depended on it. And maybe it did. Listen, Jonathan said, keeping his voice low, calm, I have a place. It's warm. There's food. You and the babies can stay there. Safe. The girl didn't answer right away. Her green eyes, so unervingly familiar, studied him with the weight of someone who'd learned trust could be dangerous. One hand pulled the babies tighter to her chest as she backed against the cold brick wall. You won't separate us? She asked, her voice barely a whisper over the storm. Jonathan's heart stuttered. Never. Something in his tone, honest, certain, must have broken through her wall, because she gave a slight nod. He extended his hand. I'm Jonathan. What's your name, sweetheart? Lily, she said quietly, still hesitant. They're Grace and Noah. A moment later, the three of them walked together into the private elevator behind the restaurant, Lily barefoot, soaked, her arms wrapped protectively around the newborns. Jonathan pressed the penthouse button. As the elevator doors slid closed, something indescribable settled over him, like the world had just tilted, and this tiny stranger was at the center of everything he hadn't known he was missing. The elevator began to rise, humming softly as it ascended 30 floors above the chaos of the storm. Jonathan glanced down to find Lily watching him, eyes narrowed in thought. You have the same eyes my dad did, she said suddenly. The words hit him like a punch to the ribs. He wasn't ready for that, not the emotion behind it, not the memories it stirred. He looked away briefly, swallowing the lump in his throat. He hadn't been called Dad, not even close, in all his 47 years. And yet here she was, this street-worn child with haunted eyes, telling him he reminded her of family. Something cracked wide open in Jonathan's chest. And this time, he didn't try to close it. The elevator hummed quietly as it ascended to the 30th floor, carrying 4 lives forever altered by a chance encounter in the rain. Jonathan stood in silence, cradling Noah gently in one arm while Lily sat cross-legged on the floor of the elevator, swaddled in a towel Elena had given her, her arms wrapped tightly around Grace. The girl didn't tremble from cold anymore, her shaking now was something deeper. Exhaustion. Fear. Maybe even hope. Jonathan studied her as she whispered softly to the baby girl in her arms, her voice protective and soothing, as if she'd done this 1,000 times. It hit him all at once, this was no child playing pretend. This little girl had become a mother out of necessity. She had learned to calm cries, offer warmth, and stand between helpless life and the cruel wind of the world. What are their names? Jonathan asked gently, careful not to overwhelm her. Lily didn't answer immediately. She tightened her hold on Grace, as if testing whether to trust him with something sacred. I call her Grace, she said finally, her voice low but sure. Because, she smiled at me first. Even when we were hiding behind that dumpster, she smiled like everything was okay. Jonathan swallowed, his throat tightening. Grace. The name suited the child's tiny, peaceful face, now nestled against Lily's shoulder. And the boy? He asked, looking down at the sleeping infant in his arms. "Noah," Lily replied. "Because he's brave. Like a little soldier. He never cried. Not once. Not even when I had to change him with napkins from the trash." Jonathan's breath hitched. Napkins from the trash? "There wasn't anything else," Lily said matter-of-factly. "I couldn't let them get cold." He nodded, unable to speak. His multi-million-dollar restaurant served 5-course meals to Wall Street giants. Yet a 9-year-old girl had fed 2 infants with scraps and kept them safe with nothing but determination and love. The elevator chimed as they reached the penthouse. Jonathan turned to her, his voice quieter now. "You did good, Lily. You did more than good. You saved them." Her eyes flickered to his, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small smile, wary, tired, but real. "They saved me too." As the doors opened to a world of marble floors and designer lighting, Jonathan realized something: this wasn't just his home anymore. It had just become a sanctuary for 3 souls who'd known too much pain, and maybe, just maybe, it was about to become a real family. The warm air inside Jonathan Reed's penthouse was a stark contrast to the storm still raging outside. Elena Ruiz, his housekeeper of 15 years, stood frozen at the sight before her. Her eyes darted from the soaked billionaire to the shivering little girl in oversized clothes, who sat cross-legged on the pristine white rug. Cradled gently in her lap were 2 tiny infants, bundled in what looked like ripped hotel linens. "Mr. Reed?" Elena stammered, barely able to process what she was seeing. Who are these children?" Jonathan's coat dripped rain onto the marble floor, but he didn't seem to notice. "They're staying with us for a while, Elena," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of a decision already made. Before Elena could ask more, the penthouse door burst open. Wind howled in from the hallway as Richard Kane, Jonathan's longtime business partner and rival, strode in unannounced, his designer overcoat soaked, his leather shoes clicking with arrogant precision. "Jonathan," he said without so much as a greeting, shaking off his umbrella like a dog. "We need to talk about the Q4 projections before your latest distractions spiral into full-blown insanity." He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes landed on the small group in the living room, the girl with the fierce green eyes, the 2 sleeping infants, the billionaire standing strangely protective over all of them. Well, Richard said with a slow, amused smile. "What do we have here?" Jonathan's posture stiffened. "Not now, Richard." But Richard was already circling them like a shark, his gaze calculating. The great Jonathan Reed, Chicago's coldest operator, suddenly playing house with street children? Oh, this will be interesting news for the board. Especially given the recent missed meetings and your refusal to sign off on the Vegas expansion. Lily instinctively tightened her grip around the babies, her small body tensing like a drawn bow. "Who is that man?" she whispered to Jonathan. "A mistake," Jonathan muttered, eyes locked on Kane. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "She's got spirit. I'll give her that." But Jonathan, impulsive charity doesn't exactly scream stable leadership. Before Jonathan could speak, Elena stepped forward. "The children need food, warm clothes, and rest. Shall I prepare the guest rooms?" "Yes, please," Jonathan said, not breaking eye contact with Richard. As Elena led Lily down the hall, the girl looked back over her shoulder. Her voice, soft but sharp as glass, cut the air. "That man's dangerous," she said to no one in particular. "I've seen his type before. He smiles while he decides who to hurt." Richard faltered, just for a moment. But Jonathan saw it. And so did Lily. After they disappeared into the hallway, Jonathan turned back to his partner. "Get out. You'll regret this," Richard said, but there was a crack in his tone. "No," Jonathan said quietly. "What I'd regret is letting someone like you anywhere near them." The door slammed shut behind Richard, but the chill in the room lingered. Jonathan sat at his sleek, glass desk, pretending to review one of the restaurant's quarterly reports. But his thoughts kept drifting, back to the alley, to the storm, to the girl. Lily. Or Sophia, if his suspicion was even remotely right. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, his gut tight with something he hadn't felt in years. Unease. Not from business. From something personal. Something buried. It was just past midnight when a sound cut through the silence, soft murmuring. Jonathan rose instantly, moving down the dim hallway toward the guest bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. He peeked inside. The nightlight cast a golden glow over the scene. Lily lay curled on her side in the bed, sandwiched protectively between Grace and Noah. Her small arms cradled the infants as if they were her own flesh and blood. But it was her voice that stilled him. "Uncle John," she whispered in her sleep, her face twitching with a pained expression. "Daddy said you'd come find me. Said family always finds family." Jonathan froze in the doorway, every muscle in his body going taut. His breath caught in his throat as the words settled in. Uncle John. It wasn't just the name. It was the way she said it, familiar, soft, trusting. Like a memory resurfacing from a place long buried. His heart thudded painfully against his ribs. Could it really be? He took a step closer, careful not to wake her. Lily's face, though thinner and dirted by hardship, held echoes of someone he'd loved with all his heart. Marcus. His brother. And Elise. Both gone in a crash that still haunted his nights. Their daughter, Sophia, had disappeared that day. No body. No answers. Only grief and hollow reports. He'd spent months after the accident searching, hoping. Eventually, the world convinced him she hadn't survived. But now. Sophia, Lily, shifted slightly in her sleep, murmuring again, "Why can't I remember your face anymore, Uncle John? Where are you?" Jonathan sank slowly onto the edge of the bed, emotion swelling in his chest like a tidal wave. He reached out but didn't touch her. He couldn't. Not yet. His hand hovered over her shoulder as if grounding himself. He whispered back, voice rough with emotion, "I'm right here, sweetheart. I never stopped looking." She stirred slightly but didn't wake. And Jonathan just sat there in the silence, eyes glistening, as a piece of his broken heart, just maybe, began to stitch itself back together. Tomorrow, he'd order the DNA test. But tonight, he believed. Jonathan Reed couldn't sleep that night. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Chicago penthouse, city lights blinking below like distant stars, but all he could see were Lily's, no, Sophia's, green eyes, and the sound of her tiny voice whispering in her sleep, "Uncle John, Daddy said you'd come." It had been years since anyone called him that. Only one person ever had, Marcus's little girl, Sophia. She'd vanished 6 years ago after the crash that took his brother and sister-in-law's lives. Everyone had assumed she'd died too. Her body was never recovered. But now, was it possible? Could Lily be her? Jonathan's breath fogged the glass. He knew he needed more than gut instinct, he needed answers. Real ones. By 7 a.m., he was on the phone with Ron Marlowe, the most discreet and ruthless private investigator in the Midwest. Marlowe had worked with Jonathan before, always clean, always silent, and always fast. "I need you to run a deep background on a little girl," Jonathan said, voice tight with urgency. "Her name's Lily, or at least that's what she goes by. About 9 years old. She's been on the streets. Find out where she came from. Every foster home, every report. Everything. And, there are 2 babies with her. I need to know who they belong to." Marlowe didn't ask questions. He never did. "Send me photos," he replied. "I'll get on it immediately." Jonathan ended the call and exhaled sharply. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of possibility. What if this child he found cradling 2 infants in a stormy alley was the niece he had mourned? What if the universe had handed him back the one piece of family he thought he'd lost forever? He turned and looked toward the guest bedroom. The door was cracked open, and through it, he could hear soft baby coos and the occasional shuffle of tiny limbs against warm blankets. Lily, Sophia, was in there. Taking care of them like a mother. Like someone far older than her fragile frame suggested. Jonathan knew one thing with absolute certainty: this wasn't a coincidence. If Lily was Sophia, someone had failed her, badly. The system, the foster homes, maybe even people he trusted. And if she wasn't, then who was she, and how had she survived long enough to protect 2 abandoned babies with the strength of a warrior? He clenched his fists. Whatever the answer was, he'd find it. And he'd burn down anything that stood in his way. Jonathan sat rigidly in the back of the town car as the city blurred past the windows, his mind unable to shake the image of Lily cradling the babies in the penthouse. That child, no, Sophia, had carried more burden in 9 years than most did in a lifetime. And now, with the truth about the infant's mother surfacing, he braced himself for a moment that would likely crack his already breaking heart. The hospital loomed ahead, gray and sterile under an overcast sky. When Jonathan stepped into the oncology ward, Lily insisted on walking beside him, refusing to let her babies out of sight for long. Grace and Noah remained safe with Elena back at the apartment, but Lily's fingers clenched his sleeve as if drawing strength. Room 314. A nurse opened the door softly, revealing a frail young woman, pale as snow, propped up against too many pillows. Tubes snaked from her arms, but it was her eyes, sunken but still burning with life, that caught Jonathan off guard. Maya Delgado looked barely older than a child herself. Maybe 20. Maybe younger. When she saw them, her breath hitched. "Who are you?" Her voice was a whisper, more fear than curiosity. Jonathan took a slow step forward. "My name is Jonathan Reed. This is Lily. We found your babies. Grace and Noah. They're safe. Alive." The room fell into suspended silence. "Then, alive?" she breathed. "They're really alive?" "Yes," Lily said, stepping forward with surprising composure. "More than alive. They're loved." Maya broke. Tears streamed down her face as she covered her mouth with both hands, sobbing openly. "I didn't want them to see me like this," she choked out. "I thought, if I disappeared, they'd remember me better. Not like this." Jonathan's throat tightened. "They won't remember the sickness," he said gently. "They'll remember they were found. That their mother made the most heartbreaking choice, for them. Will you keep them?" Maya asked, her voice cracking. "Give them the life I can't?" Maya stared at her, overcome. "I had to leave them," she sobbed. "I didn't want them to remember me like this, dying, broken. I thought, if I left quietly, their last image of their mother would be of someone strong." Jonathan approached her bed and took her trembling hand in his. "They'll remember a mother who loved them enough to make sure they were found, to give them a chance." Her tears slowed as she squeezed his hand. "Will you keep them? Give them the life I can't?" "Yes," Jonathan said, his voice unwavering. "They'll have love, stability, a future. I promise." Maya nodded weakly, then turned to Sophia. "And you protected them. You're the reason they're here." Sophia didn't speak. She just took Grace's tiny hand and placed it gently in Maya's. It was goodbye, but it was also a promise. That these children would never be alone again. But before anyone else could speak, Maya's expression changed. Her gaze locked on Sophia with growing intensity. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted as if a distant memory had just stormed its way to the surface. "Oh my God," she breathed. You. You look exactly like her. Sophia blinked, confused. Like who? Maya slowly sat up straighter in the bed, her frail arms shaking with effort. 6 years ago, the news, there was a crash. A big one. A man and a woman died. But their daughter vanished. They never found her. Her photo was everywhere. She had those same eyes. Jonathan froze. His pulse thundered in his ears. What accident? Sophia asked quietly, her voice small, but firm. Maya's eyes darted between Jonathan and the girl, her voice now rushing, urgent. Marcus and Elise Reed. They died in that car crash, but their daughter, Sophia, was never found. You're her. I swear it. You have the same green eyes. The same face. Sophia staggered a step backward, her lips parting, but no words came. A long-buried tremor of fear and longing rippled through her chest. Jonathan's legs nearly buckled under him. Everything around him blurred except the girl standing in front of him, the niece he had grieved for, searched for, and unknowingly found. Could it really be her? Sophia turned to Jonathan, trembling. Is she right? Could I be her? Jonathan's throat tightened with emotion. He knelt beside her, his hand gently covering hers. I think you might be my family, sweetheart. A single tear rolled down Maya Delgado's cheek as she looked at the girl holding the child she had given up in desperation. You didn't just save my babies, she whispered. You saved yourself. And maybe, you saved them, too. The room went quiet, except for the soft breaths of the babies, and the realization that destiny had finally begun to make itself known. That night, as the city of Chicago hummed beneath the skyline, Jonathan Reed stood in the hallway outside the guest bedroom, watching. Inside, Sophia, still calling herself Lily, slept curled protectively between Grace and Noah, their tiny bodies tucked into her sides like baby birds in a nest. The glow of the nightlight flickered gently across the room. But something in the shadows didn't sit right with him. Then he heard it. Soft whimpers twisted into words, broken and mumbled through the veil of sleep. Daddy, don't go. Uncle John, please come find me. Jonathan's breath caught. His name. Not Mr. Jonathan. Not Sir. But Uncle John. He stepped closer, the floor creaking under his weight. Sophia thrashed lightly in the sheets, her young voice rising in distress. They said you'd come for me, but I can't remember your face. It's all dark. Jonathan's heart pounded against his ribs. A chill shot down his spine, not from fear, but from recognition. That voice, those green eyes, the way she cradled the babies like her life depended on it, it all mirrored someone he'd buried in memory years ago. His niece. Marcus's daughter. Sophia Reed. But that was impossible, wasn't it? He didn't move, didn't dare wake her. Instead, he sank into the hallway chair, eyes fixed on her small frame as the weight of possibility crashed down on him. If this was real, if the little girl asleep in the next room was Sophia, then the past 6 years hadn't stolen her. They'd hidden her. Later that evening, as Elena helped bathe Grace and Noah, Jonathan noticed the back of Sophia's shirt riding up slightly. Faint scars, long-healed, but unmistakable, ran across her lower back. His stomach twisted in silent fury. Someone had hurt her. Not just neglected. Hurt. Elena, he said quietly once the children were tucked in, she's been through more than we thought. Elena's eyes welled with tears. She reminds me of my daughter, before I lost her. She placed a trembling hand on his arm. But this girl, she's different. There's something old in her eyes. Something broken. Jonathan nodded slowly. Not just broken, he said. Buried. That night, he sat at his desk long after the others had gone to bed, staring at the glowing computer screen. Files. Reports. Photos. Everything from the night of the accident that took Marcus and Elise. A thought took root and refused to let go. What if Sophia never died? What if she's been trying to come home this whole time? And what if, by sheer miracle, or fate, she finally had? The sterile waiting room of the private genetic testing clinic felt like a courtroom, with Jonathan Reed pacing like a man awaiting a life sentence, or a miracle. The sleek white walls and quiet hum of the air conditioning did nothing to calm the storm inside him. Sitting nearby, Sophia, as his heart dared to believe, swung her feet nervously beneath the oversized chair, cradling baby Grace in her arms while Noah slept in his carrier beside her. Jonathan kept glancing at the door, waiting for Dr. Williams to emerge with the truth. He had faced corporate takeovers, hostile boards, and billion-dollar deals, but this moment was unlike anything he'd ever known. This wasn't about risk. This was about hope. This was about family. Dr. Patricia Williams entered, holding a sealed manila envelope. Her expression was unreadable, professional, but Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. "Mr. Reed," she began, walking over to them. "I've conducted thousands of genetic comparisons over my career, but I've never seen a match quite like this one." Jonathan's heart stopped. "She's Sophia Reed," the doctor confirmed, unfolding the results. "Your niece. The DNA match is definitive." For a moment, the world went utterly still. Sophia turned to look at him, wide-eyed. "I'm really, her? I'm Sophia?" Jonathan dropped to his knees before her, his voice catching. "Yes, sweetheart. You're my brother Marcus's daughter. You're the little girl we searched for, every day for 6 years." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, and she clutched Grace tighter. "But why didn't you find me sooner?" Jonathan's voice trembled. "We tried. We just didn't know where to look." Dr. Williams continued gently, "There's more. Sophia suffered severe head trauma, likely from the accident. She's been diagnosed with retrograde amnesia. That explains the memory loss." Jonathan could barely breathe. "So that's why she couldn't remember us?" "Exactly," Dr. Williams said. "But being back in familiar surroundings, around people she loves, likely triggered the recovery." Sophia looked up, her green eyes shimmering. "That's why I remembered the cookies. The French songs. Why I called you Uncle John in my sleep." He pulled her into a hug, cradling her like she was made of porcelain and dreams. "You didn't just remember us, Sophia. You found your way back." As she nestled into his arms, Jonathan finally let the tears fall. Not from fear or grief, but from overwhelming, undeniable love. She was home. The wind howled outside Jonathan Reed's penthouse, but it was nothing compared to the storm that had just walked through his front door. Richard Kane stood in the marble foyer, his tailored suit dry but his eyes cold and calculating. Elena Ruiz, sensing the tension, immediately ushered Sophia and the babies into the kitchen, her protective instincts kicking in like muscle memory. Jonathan remained calm, or tried to. "Drink," he offered, pouring himself a bourbon without waiting for a reply. "This isn't a social visit," Richard said coolly, settling into a leather chair as if he owned the place. "I know who that girl is." Jonathan's hand paused mid-pour. "I don't know what you mean." "Sophia Reed," Richard said, enunciating each syllable like a weapon. "Your brother's daughter. The one who died in that car accident 6 years ago. Except, she didn't. She's very much alive and in your care. Convenient, considering she stands to inherit 25% of our company." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "She's a child who's been through hell. She's a street rat who hit the genetic lottery," Richard spat. "And you're using her. Don't bother denying it. The board won't believe your bleeding heart routine. They'll think you found her, stashed her away, and are using her to consolidate power through a minor." Jonathan stepped forward, fury rising in his chest. "Get out." "Oh, I will," Richard said, standing, smug as ever. "But first, my offer. Resign. Sign over your shares. Walk away quietly, and I'll keep my mouth shut. Otherwise, I file an emergency custody challenge and leak to the press that you're manipulating a traumatized child to hijack control of the company." "You wouldn't dare." "I already have," Richard said, smiling like a wolf. "You've got 48 hours. Just then, a small voice interrupted them. Sophia had stepped out from the kitchen, standing tall despite her size. Her green eyes burned with fire. "You're scared of us," she said softly. "Because you know we're really family. And family is stronger than money." Richard's smile twitched. Jonathan knelt beside her and took her hand. "He's going to try to separate us, isn't he?" "I won't let that happen," Jonathan said, the promise breaking from his chest like thunder. But even as he held her close, he felt the weight of the impossible choice pressing down, his company, or his children. And he knew, some promises would demand everything. The air inside the Cook County Courthouse was thick with tension. Every creak of the wooden benches, every shuffle of a paper, echoed like thunder through the chamber. Jonathan Reed sat beside Sophia, his hand gently resting on hers. She was still just a child, barely 9, but the strength in her posture rivaled that of the most seasoned witness. Her eyes, those unmistakable Reed eyes, scanned the courtroom with quiet defiance. On the opposite side sat Richard Kane, polished to perfection in a charcoal suit, flanked by his high-priced legal team. His smug confidence radiated off him like cologne, poisoning the air around him. He leaned in toward his lawyer, whispering something that made the man smirk. They thought they had this in the bag. But Jonathan wasn't here to fold. He was here to fight. Judge Martinez, a no-nonsense woman with sharp features and sharper eyes, entered and called the hearing to order. "We are here today to address the emergency petition filed by Mr. Richard Kane regarding the custody and care of minor Sophia Reed." Kane's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, we believe Mr. Reed has shown alarming signs of instability. His decision to bring a street child into his home, without vetting, without oversight, raises grave concerns. Further, the emotional manipulation of this minor for personal or financial gain." Jonathan stood abruptly. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but that's a lie." Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Reed, you'll have your chance." Kane leaned back, satisfied. Then Sarah Chen, Jonathan's lead attorney, rose. Calm. Calculated. Brilliant. "Your Honor," she began, placing a thick folder on the bench, "the allegation that Mr. Reed has exploited this child is both false and slanderous. In fact, what we are here to expose is a 6-year cover-up orchestrated by Mr. Kane himself, that prevented this child from reuniting with her family after a fatal car accident claimed the lives of her parents." Gasps filled the room. Sarah continued, "DNA evidence confirms that Sophia Reed is the biological daughter of Marcus and Elise Reed, making her Jonathan Reed's niece. After surviving the crash, she was lost in the system under the name Jane Doe due to head trauma. Mr. Reed found her by complete coincidence. Mr. Kane, on the other hand, paid private investigators for years, not to search for her, but to monitor and suppress any signs of her return." The judge flipped through the documents as murmurs rippled through the gallery. Judge Martinez turned to Sophia. "Young lady, are you comfortable living with Mr. Reed?" Sophia stood. "He's my Uncle John. He's my family. He takes care of me and the babies like real family does. I want to stay with him forever." The courtroom went silent. After a long pause, the judge delivered her verdict. "This court finds Mr. Reed's guardianship appropriate and lawful. The petition filed by Mr. Kane is hereby denied. Additionally, an inquiry will be opened into Mr. Kane's actions related to the suppression of a missing child's case. Richard's face blanched. Jonathan squeezed Sophia's hand. She looked up at him with watery eyes and whispered, "We're safe now, right?" He nodded, his throat too tight to speak. But in his heart, he vowed, "No one will ever take you from me again." The courtroom's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, but all Jonathan Reed could hear was the steady rhythm of Sophia's breathing beside him. Her small hand gripped his tightly, her green eyes wide but resolute. In front of them, the judge prepared to deliver the ruling that would determine their future. Jonathan had faced hostile boardrooms, volatile investors, and cutthroat competitors, but nothing had ever made his heart pound like this. Behind them, Elena sat holding the twins, Grace and Noah, each wrapped in soft pastel blankets, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Sophia glanced over her shoulder, worry flickering in her eyes. "If they take me," she whispered, "promise you'll still take care of them." Jonathan turned to her, crouching to meet her gaze. "No one's taking you. Or them," he said firmly. "You're mine now, Sophia. Forever." Before she could respond, Judge Martinez looked up, her expression unreadable. After reviewing all submitted documentation, including DNA results, adoption filings, and evidence of a 6-year conspiracy to suppress this child's identity, I find no merit in Mr. Kane's claims. Custody of Sophia Reed, as well as Grace and Noah Delgado, is hereby granted to Mr. Jonathan Reed. For a moment, time stopped. Sophia didn't cry, she didn't even blink. But slowly, her small frame launched forward, wrapping her arms around Jonathan's neck with a strength that took his breath away. "Dad," she said quietly. "You really mean it?" Jonathan's throat tightened as he returned the hug. "I've never meant anything more in my life." From the gallery, Richard Kane stormed out, his lawyer trailing behind him. The man's empire, built on deceit and calculated cruelty, was crumbling. But Jonathan couldn't care less. His world was right here, in his arms. Later that evening, the penthouse was filled with quiet laughter, warm lights, and the faint scent of chocolate chip cookies in the oven. Sophia helped Elena bathe the twins, humming one of her mother's old lullabies. It had been months since she'd slept without nightmares, but tonight, something had shifted. She seemed lighter. Grounded. Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching her. The little girl who had once stood in an alley holding 2 babies was now his daughter in every way that mattered. Elena approached him quietly. "You've given her something no one else ever could." "I didn't give her anything," Jonathan said, voice low. "She gave it to me. She gave me a reason to feel again." That night, as he tucked her into bed, Sophia reached for his hand. "You know what I realized, Dad?" she asked sleepily. "What's that?" "I thought I was protecting Grace and Noah all this time. But maybe I was waiting for someone to protect me, too." Jonathan kissed her forehead gently. "You were never alone, Sophia. You just had to find your way home." She smiled softly and closed her eyes. Outside the window, the city lights blinked like distant stars. And in the warm stillness of that penthouse, a man who once measured life in profits found his greatest treasure in the title he never knew he needed, Dad. 6 months had passed since the courthouse victory that forever changed the course of Jonathan Reed's life. His penthouse, once a sterile monument to power and solitude, had been transformed into a vibrant, chaotic haven. Finger paintings lined the fridge. Toy trains and plush animals cluttered the marble floors. A faint lullaby echoed from the nursery. This was no longer just a home, it was a sanctuary built on healing, second chances, and the fierce love of a makeshift family. Sophia, now 9, had grown into her new life with remarkable grace. The street-smart girl who once guarded 2 abandoned infants in a rainstorm had blossomed into a confident, wise beyond her years young lady. Her green eyes still held the shadows of her past, but now they also gleamed with purpose. Hope and Jack, nearing their first birthday, were healthy, happy, and deeply attached to Sophia, their unwavering protector, and to Jonathan, the man who had become their father in every sense. Elena Ruiz, once Jonathan's housekeeper, had seamlessly stepped into the role of family matriarch. Her maternal warmth, long buried by years of grief for the daughter she lost, now flowed freely. She hummed softly as she folded tiny socks and spooned mashed carrots into Jack's eager mouth. One quiet Saturday morning, as sunlight spilled through the penthouse windows, Elena appeared with a thick envelope bearing an official gold seal. "Sir," she said, her voice rich with emotion. "The foundation documents have arrived." Jonathan took the envelope with reverence. Inside were the final papers for the Marcus and Elise Reed Foundation for Missing Children, named for his late brother and sister-in-law, whose memories still echoed in the laughter of their daughter. The foundation had been endowed with $100 million, earmarked to fund search operations, offer therapy and support for displaced children, and ensure no child endured what Sophia had. He looked up to see Sophia watching from across the room, her arms cradling a sleepy hope. "Daddy," she said softly, her voice edged with something new, hope. "Will the foundation help other kids like me, kids who get lost but still want to come home?" Jonathan's throat tightened. He walked to her and knelt, meeting her eyes. "That's exactly what it'll do, sweetheart. And you're going to help decide how we help them." Her face lit up, a perfect blend of Marcus's heart and Elisa's grace. "I want to help them remember who they are. Like you helped me." Jonathan pulled her into his arms, overcome by the power of the moment. This wasn't about legacy or redemption anymore. It was about building something lasting, not in brick or revenue, but in lives saved and families restored. The man who once measured worth in profit margins now knew true success: a little girl saved from darkness, a pair of babies given a future, and a mission born from pain that would outlive them all. As Jack gurgled nearby and Hope blinked drowsily in Sophia's embrace, Jonathan realized something profound. This wasn't just a foundation. It was the beating heart of their second chance. And it was only the beginning. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria buzzed with anticipation. Journalists, industry titans, and philanthropists filled the gold-trimmed space, eager for the long-rumored announcement from Jonathan Reed, the man who'd all but vanished from public life after a meteoric rise through the culinary and hospitality world. Backstage, Jonathan stood in front of a tall mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored gray suit, but his reflection didn't hold his focus. Instead, he watched the three children beside him. Sophia, now a confident 9-year-old, smoothed the skirt of her soft blue dress and held baby Grace on her hip like a natural. Little Noah clung to Jonathan's hand, babbling quietly as if he could feel the weight of what was coming. "Ready, sweetheart?" Jonathan asked. Sophia met his gaze with calm resolve. "It's time everyone knew the truth about family, Daddy." The word still pierced Jonathan's heart in the best way possible. Daddy. It had taken months for her to say it freely, but now she did without hesitation. The lights dimmed. The host's voice echoed through the ballroom, announcing Jonathan's entrance. As he stepped onto the stage with the children flanking him, the room fell into hushed awe. The sight of Manhattan's once most guarded billionaire holding a baby, with two more children beside him, was not something any of them had expected. Jonathan took a deep breath, approached the podium, and began, his voice warm but steady. "Good evening. A year ago, I believed I knew what success meant: quarterly profits, flawless spreadsheets, influence. I was wrong." He gestured to Sophia, who stood tall beside him. "This is Sophia Reed. She is my daughter by adoption, my niece by birth, and my hero by choice." A ripple of surprise swept the room. "A year ago," Jonathan continued, "she was alone on the streets of Chicago, protecting two abandoned babies with nothing but her courage and love. What I didn't know then was that she was also the daughter of my late brother, Marcus, presumed dead in an accident 6 years ago." The room gasped. Cameras flashed. Reporters frantically typed into phones. "My business partner, Richard Kane, knew. He had access to the truth and buried it to protect his claim to our company. He wanted me to believe Sophia had died with her parents. But love, as I've learned, has a way of surviving even the darkest deception. Jonathan paused, scanning the crowd, then stepped aside so Sophia could speak. She clutched the microphone with both hands and spoke clearly, her voice ringing with quiet power. Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who chooses to love you, even when you have nothing. My dad didn't find me, I found him. And he chose to love me and my brother and sister like we were his own. That's what real family means. A hush settled over the room, then a swell of applause followed. Tears welled in more than a few eyes. Jonathan returned to the mic. Tonight, we launched the Marcus and Elise Reed Foundation for Missing Children. $100 million, and more importantly, a promise, to help other lost kids like Sophia find their way back home. The applause became thunderous. But Jonathan heard only one sound clearly, Sophia whispering beside him, "They're really going to know now, aren't they?" "Yes, sweetheart," he said, lifting Noah into his arms. "They're going to know everything. And from now on, no one stays lost." The scent of warm chocolate chip cookies drifted through the penthouse, mixing with the gentle hum of a lullaby Sophia sang softly under her breath. The kitchen, once a sterile domain of polished marble and untouched appliances, now pulsed with the sounds of family, bubbling batter, quiet giggles, and the patter of Noah's tiny hands slapping the high chair tray. Jonathan Reed stood at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, flour dusting the sleeves of his designer shirt. He looked nothing like the man he'd been a year ago. Back then, he was all business, sharp suits, tighter schedules, and a heart barricaded by grief. But now, as he glanced down at Sophia carefully spooning dough onto a tray beside him, his eyes welled with something deeper than nostalgia. This wasn't just baking. It was resurrection. "Daddy," Sophia said, her voice almost a whisper, "do you think my first daddy and mommy would be proud of us?" Jonathan paused, heart catching on the word that had, for months, teetered between uncle and Mr., but now, fully and finally, it was daddy. He set the spoon down and turned to her, brushing a strand of flour-dusted hair behind her ear. "Sweetheart, Grace and Noah gave you life. But you gave all of us the strength to keep going. They would be proud beyond words." Sophia smiled, radiant and brave, so much like her father it made Jonathan's throat tighten. She scooped another cookie onto the tray. "Then I think we should help other kids too. Like Grace and Noah. Like me. So they're not alone." Jonathan nodded, placing a hand gently on her back. "We already are, remember? Tomorrow's the big day. The press conference, the foundation's launch, everyone will know our story." She looked up at him, nervous excitement flashing in her green eyes. "What if they think I'm lying?" "They won't," he said firmly. "Because we have truth on our side. And love. And each other." Outside, the night wrapped the city in quiet, but inside the penthouse, everything was alive. Elena passed by with a bottle for Noah, who babbled happily as Sophia danced a wooden spoon in front of him like a puppet. The refrigerator, once bare, was now covered in finger paintings. The sleek glass shelves now held picture books and worn teddy bears. This wasn't a bachelor's domain anymore, it was a home. As they cleaned up, Sophia glanced out at the twinkling skyline. "Tomorrow, can we start planning how to help other lost kids find their families? Like, really help?" Jonathan knelt beside her, meeting her at eye level. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tomorrow, and every day after. That's what families do, Sophia. We make sure no one stays lost forever." She wrapped her arms around him tightly. He held her even tighter. Above them, the stars blinked quietly, witnesses to a legacy not written in stock prices or boardroom wins, but in bedtime hugs, kitchen flower fights, and the promise of a new beginning. A legacy built not on empire, but on love. We'd love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and rate this story from 10 to 100. Tell us where you're watching from too. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if this touched your heart, check out more uplifting videos by clicking on the end screen now.